Hi everyone, this is Jarle from Handmade Card, Happy Hearts. Thank you for joining me. For this card, I tried to create a little scene where I used a bunch of cute little critters. So first of all, let me show you which dies and stamp sets I used for this card. So I already showed you the stitched hillside backdrop, the S'more the Merrier stamp set, the Superstar set, and this lovely Upon a Star stamp set. Off camera, I already die cut the stitched hillside backdrop out of some rainforest cardstock. And then my other card panel that I was going to ink blend is from Bristol Smooth cardstock. Now I did make a little pencil mark there, so I would know exactly where my night sky would begin. So here I showed you the colors of oxide inks I would use. So I have antique linen, Victorian velvet, seedless preserves and black soot. I wanted to create a kind of a purple sky that has a little bit of a glow on the bottom. So I started with antique linen and then the Victorian velvet. And then I always go back to the lighter colors. So here that was the antique linen. Then I went over again with the seedless preserves for the first time. And when that was blended in, I went back to the Victorian velvet and then again to that antique linen color. Now, to really get that night sky look, I ink blended some black soot right along the edges of my panel, just actually at the top of my panel. And then again, I went over it with seedless preserves, Victorian velvet and antique linen. As I already mentioned in my previous videos, Bristol Smooth cardstock is actually the best paper to ink blend on. You get really smooth transitions with this type of cardstock. Now, to add a little bit of interest to my sky, I splattered on just some clean water on my panel and then blotted that off with a paper towel. Now, that rainforest cardstock, I wanted to blend a bit on that rainforest cardstock as well. So that little frame, for that I used the black soot, since it would match that night sky perfectly. And then for the edges of those hills, I used chipped sapphire. I wasn't going to ink blend the whole hill, but just the edges, also to have a bit of color variation. So there I put a little piece of a little scrap piece of paper into that slit, and then I could ink blend on top. So here you can see the scene coming together. Now, since recently I found out that it was actually helping me to place down my images before I stamped them, so I could already decide which images I was going to use on my little scene here. So that's why I chose a bunch of stamp sets from Lawn Fawn and then just made sure I was happy with all the images. Then I stamped all my images with MFT Extreme Black ink. This is a very fine ink for Copic coloring. And this is something I also do very often, is to enhance my black lines with some Copic multi-liner. Now on to the coloring. I won't be showing you the whole coloring process, just a few of those critters. Now for the foxes, I used E18, E15, E13 and E11 for those white spots at the back of his tail and on his little face there, I just used a neutral color, so the N0, and I blended that one out with the colorless blender. So here you can see me putting down the darkest shade, blending it out with the medium one, and then blending that one out again with my lightest shade. And I always do this 2 times. This gives me the most beautiful blend. As you can see too, the first time I don't color the whole image. So for the first layer, I already I always leave a white spot, so that will be the highlight of my image. I always try to divide my image into different sections. So here I started with the tail of the fox, then I did his little head, and now I am coloring his whole body and his arms. This gives me a little bit more control by doing it in little sections like this. Now also I want to mention here for that fox I used 4 shades. I do think that with the earth tones and the grays, that it is always better to have different shades. So I always use at least 3 colors. Or with the earth shades and the grays, it's actually better to have even 4 shades. I think the blending is much better when I do that. Now here you can see me coloring in the bunny. Now I do have to mention that by die cutting the bunny, that my die actually shifted, so I ended up not using that colored bunny, so I went ahead and colored a new one off camera. That doesn't happen very often, but I think I didn't tape it down enough with my low-tech tape, so the die must have shifted when going through that die cutting machine. Now for the bunny and for the mouse, I used some warm grays. For the bunny, I used W5, W3, W1. Now for the little mouse, I skipped the W5, and the darkest shade is here actually the W3. Then I have the medium, the W1, and then for my lightest color I have the W00. And then for the little tummy I used the RV11 and RV10. Now here you can see all the images I colored. Now I wanted that hillside backdrop to be a little bit foam mounted, so I put down a bunch of foam squares throughout that whole panel. As you can see, there's lots of foam tape there. And then I just arranged my images just like I did before with those stamps, and I'm just placing them all around until I'm happy with how everything is coming together. Now here I noticed that that marshmallow stick, or I don't know how you actually call it, that stick was a little bit too long, so I cut a little piece off with my scissors so that it would all fit better. I think I put down everything with liquid glue because there was already dimension because of the foam squares on that hillside backdrop, and that's why I chose not to put any more foam tape on the other critters, otherwise it would be too bulky. Now here for that fox and that hedgehog, I did use some ultra thin glue drops. So it was a little bit more dimensional than just the liquid glue, but it was still kind of flat on that card. Now, since I didn't have any place on the front of my card, I stamped an image inside my card base. Then for the finishing touches, I use my white gel pen and then of course also this Lawn Fawn glitter pen. And I just went over all of the stars and the moon with that pen just to give it a little subtle shimmer there. This always gives it a finishing touch. It's always the little details that matter, at least in my opinion. So I think this quite finishes off the card for today. I hope you like this cute little scene with all those critters and that beautiful purple night sky. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and also consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. Have a great day and I'll see you very soon. Bye!